guys, welcome back from spring break. It's great to see you. Clean my camera there for a second. So it is wonderful to be back. I hope that you guys all had a great break, and I just wanted to kind of go over with you what we're doing today. So go ahead and follow along with me as we open up different things and give yourself a chance to complete the tasks. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do our final vote on March Madness. So our final vote for March Madness, and you can open up that PowerPoint and follow along with me. That's in Teams. Let me go ahead and pull mine up. Final round of March Madness. I know it's April, but since I was quarantined, I did not get a chance to do this with you. So I wanted us to wrap this activity up. So you're going to be using the QR code or the link that I have posted in Microsoft Teams. And what we're going to do is I'm going to read the poems to you one last time, and then you're going to cast your final vote and tell me why you think that poem should win. So I want to hear your justification for why this one is the winning poem. So here's our QR code. If you wish to use that, I've also posted a link in Microsoft Teams. We Wear the Mask by Paul Laurence Dunbar. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. And we've spent a lot of time talking about this poem and some of the meaning behind it. We've talked about how this poem was written after the Civil War, and it was a lot about the period of Reconstruction. So once the Civil War ended and Black people that were formerly slaves were granted emancipation, they had to learn how to fit into society in a new way. And so Paul Laurence Dunbar is writing about kind of wearing a mask that has one face out to the public, and then on the inside we cover up our grieving, we cover up the way that we feel about the way society treats us. Now we've also made connections to how we might have a personal connection to this. I know that there's times in life that I've worn a mask. And I was thinking, I watched this commercial just the other day about the little lady. She's like a pie plate and she holds it up over her face and it has a smile even when she's frowning. And that made me think about this poem, how sometimes we keep secret the things that are inside of us and how we're feeling. Now that poem is up against The Summer I Was 16 by Geraldine Connolly. And so let me go ahead and read that one to you. The turquoise pool rose up to meet us, its slide a silver afterthought down which we plunged, screaming, into a mirage of bubbles. We did not exist beyond the gaze of a boy. Shaking water off our limbs, we lifted up from ladder rungs across the fern-cool lip of rim. Afternoon. Oiled and sated, we sunbathed, rosed and paraded the concrete, danced to the low beat of the Duke of Earl, past cherry colas, hot dogs, dreamsicles. We came to the counter where bees staggered into root beer cups and drowned. We gobbled cotton candy torches, sweet as furtive kisses, shared on benches beneath summer shadows, cherry, elm, sycamore. We spread our chenille blankets across grass, pressed radios to our ears, mouthing the old words, then loosened thin bikini straps and rubbed baby oil with iodine across sunburned shoulders, tossing a glance through a chain link at an improbable world. I love this poem. I think it's really beautiful. And I think it captures a moment in time. It's a poem that is a little bit nostalgic. It's written from somebody who's an adult that's looking back. But for you in this moment in time, this might feel really real. And it's about summertime, yes, but it's also about a time in life where you don't really have anything to worry about except for like living into the next day, and enjoying your time with your friends and being flirtatious with people, and just having this like really perfect, beautiful summer. So let's take a second to compare between the two, and then I want for you to pick which one is the best to you, which one really speaks to your heart. And you're going to vote on forms. And you're going to pick between The Summer I Was 16 or We Wear the Mask. And then you're going to tell me, why do you think that the winning poem deserves to win? Actually, I'm going to add class period because that will help me grade this faster. All right, there we go. So I've got that ready for you. So let's go ahead and press pause on this video so that you can have a chance to vote and come back to me when you're done. So for the rest of the day, our agenda is that we're going to do a guided exercise. We're preparing for the EOCs. EOCs start next week, guys, and we've got English the first week. So we're going to start out with doing a guided exercise on semicolons and looking at actual test examples. Then I'm going to have you guys practice some conventions review with your grammar handouts with worksheets 4.1b and 4.3b. And then we're going to practice claims, evidence, and commentary with a little mini lesson. So let's go ahead and take a look at those semicolons, the semicolon practice that we're going to do today. And that is listed under EOC questions for bell work in your in Teams. So let's take a look here at colons and semicolons. And these practice questions we've taken directly from EOC tests and practice tests. So these are kind of exactly what you can expect when we're talking about testing next week. And so the test itself is broken into different categories. You've got an English language, which looks at your skills with colons and semicolons and things like that. You've got English literature, which asks you to read and then look for things like author's purpose and claims and evidence. And then we have a writing portion, and typically the writing portion is either going to be a narrative where you continue on a story in the style, in the same style as the author, or you make up your own story, or an argumentative. So we're going to have kind of play out all of those different options so that we kind of feel pretty prepared for next week. We've been working on these skills all year long, but now we're just kind of going to do a little bit of review. So which change, if any, is needed to revise the underlying text? And so let's take a look at this text. Prior to the American Revolution, we've got a comma after an introductory phrase right there. Women had the right to vote in several colonies, semicolon. However, comma, by 1807, comma, every single, sorry, there's a typo there, state in the new American Republic denied women access to the vote. Let's take a look there. What do you guys think? What do you think is what's needed to revise this underlined text, if anything? So I want for you to kind of think in your head, what would you do if you were confronted with this question? So we've got the options. A, B, C, and D, which is no change at all. Oops. So our option is colonies, semicolon. However, no commas. Then colonies, semicolon, colonies, comma, however, comma, colonies, comma, however, semicolon by 1807. And then our last option, which is no change. So take a second, think about your semicolon rules. Remember that semicolons are going to make a stop, okay? We've also got that transitional word right there, however. So how do we treat that word, however, by 1807? So what do you guys think we should do there? Okay, so let's take a look. So we've got some options. And what we can do, here's our example again. All right, so the first A is colonies, semicolon. However, this is missing a comma after that transition word. We also call that a conjunctive adverb. So it's missing something after the however. We know we need a comma after one of these transition words. So anytime that you see however, therefore, moreover, etc., we always are going to need a comma after that transition word. Now we've got colonies, comma, however, comma, by 1807. The problem with this one is that the comma is not strong enough. We have a complete independent clause here. Prior to the American Revolution, women had the right to vote in several colonies. That's a sentence. If we're continuing on a sentence, then we only have some options. We've got comma and fanboy, or we've got semicolon, right? And so semicolon is missing here. And that means if we used a comma, then that would be a comma slice. Then we have colonies, comma, however, semicolon. So if you remember that we need to have the semicolon after an independent clause, then we can eliminate answer C. And that means that our answer to this question is that it doesn't need a change at all. So if you voted for no change, good job. All right, let's take a look at this next example. Finally, after decades of struggle, the 19th Amendment was adopted in 1920, thus fulfilling the suffrage goals of the Seneca Falls Convention with these words: "The right of citizens of the United States shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on the account of sex." So we see these words, comma, and then the right of citizens. So we've got option A, which is these words, colon, the right of citizens, these words, period, these words, semicolon, and then no change. So we just went over this before we went on break. One good dead giveaway is anytime that we have one of those quotations saying, I'm going to say something, then we are always going to need one specific type of punctuation. So if we are looking at our options, then we need those colons there, right? The colon introduces. If we have a period, then that creates a sentence fragment. If we have a semicolon, if we just remember that semicolons never set up a quote, then we're going to be good there. And then if we have no change, a comma can set up a quote, but since this quote is preceded by a complete sentence, we're going to always use that colon. So anytime that we've got a colon, remember semicolons and colons are always going to come after that complete independent clause. So anytime that we see a complete sentence that could be ended with a period right there, then that means that's an independent clause. All right, let's take a look at this example. Which change, if any, is needed to revise the underlined text? For one thing, each part is printed individually, comma, therefore, comma, it can be precisely customized for the person who will use it. So we've got that option. We've got individually with no comma, and then we have a comma after therefore, that transition word. We've got individually and then an M dash with therefore. We've got an individually with a semicolon and then therefore. And then we've got no change. So the first thing that we have to really look at this sentence is for one thing, each part is printed individually. Is that a complete sentence? Okay. So we know we need some kind of punctuation there. Individually is not going to help us because that's going to create a run-on, but we do know that that comma, we do need that comma after therefore, right? Because that's one of the rules that we follow. Individually, if you just remember that dashes add drama and we don't need any drama, then you're going to know that you don't need to use that dash. Individually, semicolon. So remember when I asked you before, can this sentence, for one thing, each part is printed individually, can that stand on its own? Yes, it has a subject, it has a verb, it has a complete thought. Therefore, we need that semicolon followed by the transition word therefore with a comma. If we don't, then we're just not using strong enough punctuation. So remember, the comma is the weakest form of punctuation. It's just not strong enough to support this sentence. All right, let's take a look at this example. Garden design must take several important factors into consideration, comma, light, comma, color, comma, seasonal interest, comma, and soil quantity. Okay, so here we are with into consideration, comma, light and color. So the first thing that we're going to start is we're going to start with that test before the comma. Garden design must take several important factors into consideration. Okay, what factors am I needing to take into consideration? Light, color, seasonal interest, and soil quality. So these are all examples right here, right? So what do I use for an example? Do I use a semicolon? Do I use a comma? Do I use a colon, or do I not make a change at all? So if you remember what a colon does, same thing as a semicolon, it stops and then it offers an example, right? So if we're looking at this, then that means that the semicolon is not going to set up a list. It's not going to be the one that we want. Into consideration, light, the colon it needs to come at the end of an independent clause, not during the list. And then we have into consideration, colon, light, color, and that's setting up our list correctly. And then just to remember here that a comma just never sets up a list. All right, we've got our next example. Which change, if any, is needed to revise the underlined text? If the area to be planted is sunny, comma, the plant choices are abundant, comma. However, if there are more shade, the plant pool shrinks. So the first thing that we know for automatically sure is that there's something wrong with the sentence because there is no punctuation after our transitional word. Okay, we also need to say, are we using dialogue? Are we setting up a list? If we're not using dialogue, if we're not setting up a list, then that colon's not going to work. Abundant semicolon, however, comma, that might be a contender. Abundant comma, however, semicolon. You might be confusing your semicolon and colon rules, and you might think that that works right because there's a comma or there's a semicolon after however. And then we have our last option, which is no change. So abundant, colon. Colons with conjunctive adverbs do not join to form independent clauses. And another way of just saying that is that a colon can't work with one of these conjunctive phrases. So that can help you to eliminate that always if you know that the colon's just not going to work there. Then we have abundant semicolon. So we've got a complete independent clause. If the area to be planted is sunny, the plant choices are abundant. That's an independent clause. So I can now use a semicolon to link together the next part, but I do need some punctuation after my transitional word, after however, and that's always going to be a comma. The C just inverted those rules. And then D, if we have no change, then there's a comma splice and a run-on sentence, which is double trouble. All right, which change, if any, is needed to revise the underlined text? Great gardeners, who often do their best work in the most challenging situations, know that shady spots are ideal places to locate water elements, which can include a small waterfall, an artificial stream, or an inky black reflecting pool. So let's take a look at elements which can include. Elements, semicolon, which can include. Elements, comma, which can include comma, elements, comma, which can include, or no change. Okay, so let's take a look here. Number one, we don't have two independent clauses. Great gardeners, who often know their best work in the most challenging situations, know that shady spots are ideal places to locate water elements. So I'm leaving something off of the sentence if I have a semicolon there. Elements, which can include, this which can include is essential to the sentence, so we can't set those off by commas. Elements, which can include, and then if you don't, and that's the option that we want to include. Now, technically, you could use a colon right there to set up a list. All right, so that goes through our EOC grammar review, just to kind of help us prepare. And now what I would like for you to do is go ahead and press pause, and you are going to complete the conventions review, which are just practicing our skills with commas, and then looking at any kind of errors or problems with the sentence. We're going to do worksheet 4.1B only, okay? So go ahead and press pause on this video and complete your grammar worksheets 4.1. All right, guys, so in Teams, you have a handout, and I'd like for you to go ahead and open that handout for me. We're going to be working from that, and you can make notes on your actual copy of this. So we're talking about citing, and what does it mean to create, to cite text-based evidence, and how do we do that? So how do we properly cite textual evidence? So sorry about that. Give me just 1 second, guys. I'm trying to print a copy so that I can look at a copy while I'm talking to you guys about it. But my printer doesn't want to work. Okay, so we're talking about citing textual-based evidence in literature, and this is focusing on the Common Core Standard RL6. So the first question that I'm asking you guys is, what does citing text-based evidence actually mean? So what does that mean? Citing textual evidence means for students to look back in the text and find evidence to support an idea, thought, or claim. Now, always we need to find strong evidence and prove our thinking. So you guys are going to encounter on the EOC some questions that are going to ask you to find evidence to support whatever claim that an author is making. And that can be a really challenging task. So we're going to kind of go through, what does that look like? We are always expected to properly cite our evidence with accurate punctuation and style. And so in the writing portion, you'll be asked to kind of do some work with author's claim, usually. So we kind of want you to be set up to respond to that. But then you also might be getting some questions that ask you to look for strong evidence and to prove your thinking. So how do we do this? How do we do it? So citing textual evidence means that you need to look back in the text to find evidence to support an idea, thought, or claim. Remember that you need strong evidence and to prove your thinking. And then remember that we're going to properly cite our evidence with accurate punctuation and style. So first the question is, how do I actually cite textual evidence? This is step number 1. We want to start with a strong transitional statement. For example, on page X, the author states. Now here's a good tip for you, that if you get the name of the author in the passage, then you always want to use the author's name versus the author states, or the title of the text versus the text state. The author clarifies, the author explains, or fill in the blank says. Okay, so I want you to take a look at those examples, and then I have for you to fill in, how do I properly cite textual evidence? So the first question asks you to fill in your transitional statements. So you've got these 4 transitional statements that you can use. Go ahead and fill those in on your worksheet. Oh, I'm sorry, I left one off, according to the author. So pick which ones, write all of these down so that you have them on your cheat sheet. This is kind of a really great way of refreshing those skills. All right, so now how do I properly cite that textual evidence? This is also going to come in handy when we move into the body paragraphs of our argumentative essay. So following the strong transition, which you guys just wrote, we're going to punctuate our text evidence like this. We're going to have a quotation mark, an open quotation, word for word from the text. That's our textual evidence. We're going to close that with a quotation mark. And then we're going to put in parentheses, followed by the author's last name and the page number. If we don't know the author's last name or the page number, then you do not have to put a citation right there in your EOC paper. Remember that a period ends the sentence, and that goes at the end of the quotation. However, the parentheses. However, you will notice that a lot of times they do give you the author's name or they give you the title of the story. So we can use those for parenthetical citations. So go ahead and practice this inside of the box, writing out the word for word textual evidence and then Smith 14 after our following with our strong transition. So for example, we would start with, according to Smith, here's my textual evidence, and then in parentheses, we're going to end that, and that's our example citation. Here we go. The author states, comma, 90% of students have cellular devices, and that's quoted from Reagan, page 241. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to model a little bit from you. We're looking at All Summer in a Day, page 2. He gave her a shove, but she did not move. Rather, she felt herself be moved only by him and nothing else. They edged away from her. They would not look at her. She felt them go away. And this was because she would play no games with them in the echoing tunnels of the underground city. If they tagged her and ran, she stood blinking after them and did not follow. When the class sang songs about happiness and life and games, her lips barely moved. Only when they sang about the sun and summer did her lips move as she watched the drenched windows. Then, of course, the biggest crime of all was that she had only come here 5 years ago from Earth, and she remembered the sun and the way the sun was and the way the sky was when she was 4 in Ohio. And they had been on Venus all their lives, and they had only been 2 years old when the last sun came out, and had long since forgotten the color and the heat of it and the way that it really was. So you always want to kind of highlight, and when we're working through our your physical text, you're going to have a paper and pen text. You can underline, okay? You can underline in the text that claims, the things that support your thinking, your claims, or your ideas. So the question here that I'm asking, how does the reader know that Margot, our speaker, is unhappy? Okay. So let's take a look. What do we see in here that lets us know that Margot is not happy? So first of all, she won't play any games with them, right? That might tell us something. If they play tag with her, then she just blinks at them and she doesn't follow. When the class sings songs about happiness and life and games, her lips barely move. And the only time that she sings is about the sun and summer. And then she's also maybe unhappy because she came here 5 years ago and she's 10 now. So when she was 4, she remembers what it was like to see the sun. But since they all live on Venus, they don't know the same thing. So those are all possible things that we can use to talk about why she's unhappy. So if I'm going to underline them, then she'll play no games with them. When they sang songs, she didn't really sing. Only when they sang about summer and sun did she actually sing. So those are some evidence that I could use. So how does the reader know that Margot is unhappy? So according to the text, or according to Ray Bradbury, when the class sang songs about happiness and life and games, her lips barely moved, and that would be on Bradbury too. Now it's your turn. I want for you to practice this skill. And before you do, I want you to fill in that model on the worksheet that we just did. And now you're going to practice this yourself. You're going to read this passage all by yourself. I want for you to highlight based on the question, how does Bradbury use word choice to create imagery in the landscape of rain? So I want you to read the passage. I want for you to look for word choices that create ideas about imagery in the landscape of rain. I want you to highlight those in on the passage, underline or use your Microsoft Word highlighter. And then I want you to type into the Word document and submit that for me for credit for today. And that is our work for today. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm here to help, and have a great day.